Good morning, 9 o'clock service. Good to see you guys here in the house. Those of you who are not in the room, good morning to you. Those tuning in online, we're glad you're tuning in wherever you are, that you're part of our family today and watching with us. My name's Austin. If I haven't met you yet, one of the pastors here at Gospelife. We are in a series on Romans, and I'm just actually surprised that you all came back this week after last week. Last week we waded in some deep waters together, and you came back for some more. So if you're last week and you're like a Calvinist and you like loved it last week, and you're actually maybe an Arminian and you were uncomfortable last week, this week Calvinists are going to be a little uncomfortable and Arminians are going to be actually at home. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, it's good. I actually envy you a little bit. It's just read the Bible, okay? And what I'm basically illustrating is in 2 chapters, we get 2 different doctrines that we have to hold together in tension. And so if you loved God's sovereignty last weekend, this weekend is all about human responsibility. We're going to hear words like anyone and all and everyone. So not exclusive, but including everybody. And so we're in Romans chapter 10. This is one of the final installments of book 2 of our Roman series. We'll finish up book 2 next week, and then we'll go into this sermon series on interviewing Jesus when I'm doubting. And then after Easter, we'll pick up book 3 of Romans, which will be chapters 12 through 16. So it'll take us all the way up till when the kids get out of school. And so that's how we're putting forth the entire book of Romans together. But as we've started this series, it's been a title of ours, a tag of ours, that simply indicates this, that the gospel rewrites my story in God's plan. That the gospel has rewritten your story. Some of you have family lives of dysfunction, and the gospel has broken those cycles of addiction and of issues and dysfunction, and you've started a different path because the gospel has transformed you and you've rewritten your story, and it's been a part of God's plan. What the Apostle Paul is going to help us with today in chapter 10 is, how do I get people that I love to also believe in the message of the gospel? People that I love, people that I know dearly, maybe they're coworkers, maybe they're families that I know, and I'm like, I want them to know Jesus like I know Jesus, because it's revolution, it's change, it's rewritten my story, and I want them to experience that same thing. So how do I do it? What's the strategy? And the Apostle Paul, who wrote Romans under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, is going to give us the strategy that doesn't change. It's the same strategy as old as time, how God transforms people, how people receive and respond the gospel. And so today we're wrestling with the question, how do I share my faith with people I love so that the gospel can transform them? That's where we're headed today. And I just want to set the table, because what we do is we understand the biblical context, and then we make a bridge to a contemporary example, or how we live it today. And so what is the Apostle Paul wrestling with in chapter 10? Well, before chapter 10, let's go to chapter 9. You remember last week, the question he was wrestling with is, has God failed his people? And Paul says, absolutely not. God fulfills his promises, he is absolutely just, and you are still held accountable. That's what we wrestled with last week. It's online if you want to go watch that message. This week, the question is, how do I get people I love to understand and comprehend and believe the message of the gospel? For Paul, it was his Jewish countrymen. He was a Jew, and he wanted all the Jews to also believe in the Messiah, the one they've studied in the Old Testament. And so he had a heart not just for a couple people, he had a heart for his whole nation. In a way, we could make that leap to us today in this room, where we can even zoom out to just not people we know, but our whole nation of America. We love America, and we ask the question, like, how can America understand and know the gospel and be turned back to Jesus? That's Paul's cry out. He wants his Jewish brothers and sisters to know the gospel. And for us, we want our people, the ones we know here in this area, but also our entire nation to know Jesus. And that's where Paul is at this morning. What he's going to do is he's going to walk through three movements of sharing your faith. It's going to be understand, believe, and share. That's where he's headed. He wants you to understand, wants you to believe, and then he's going to talk about sharing. And so if you're in the text with me, Romans chapter 10. I'm going to get there. Is anyone else there? Okay. I see you back there. All right. This is a responsive sermon today. I want to hear that you're with me. All right. We're going to walk through the text together, verse by verse. But here we are in Romans 10. This is the Apostle Paul saying this in verse 1. Brothers, my heart's desire and prayer to God for them is that they may be saved. For all of God's sovereignty in chapter 9, Paul still believes and knows that his prayers help move people to Jesus. That there's a human element at play of him praying to God that his countrymen would be saved. Here's where it starts. If we're going to share our faith faithfully with people that don't know Jesus, it's going to start with a holy ache. You got to get in your bones, in your spirit, a sense of there are people I know that are lost and don't know Jesus. Chapter 9, you remember Paul said, I am in anguish that my brethren don't know the Messiah, Jesus. Here he says, I pray, my heart's desire is that they may know Jesus. You've got to get in your spirit a holy ache for the lostness you see around you. And that's going to propel you to make some decisions, to take some steps that may be uncomfortable. But for the Apostle Paul, he feels it in his bones. The lostness he sees. He understands, I want them to be saved. And you've got to have that same spirit as Paul does today. And so he goes in verse 2. He says, for I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. For being ignorant of the righteousness of God and seeking to establish their own, they did not submit to God's righteousness. For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. So where we start at? We start out with Paul wants us to understand the gospel. That's the first movement. And how he helps us understand the gospel is he tells us what it's not. And how his people, the Jewish people, have stumbled. How they missed it. They were so very close, yet they missed the Messiah. They had all of the spiritual privileges, yet they missed it. Well, how did they miss it? Well, he says they had a zeal for God. Meaning they were fired up. They're ready to do anything for God. I'm a dad of a second grader, and our coach is actually here with us today. And there's just something about second graders playing basketball is they got zeal. And they're running around like bees on the court. But they don't make the basket much. They're just little second graders, right? And sometimes they do, and we cheer them on as parents. But they have a lot of zeal, but that they're missing the basket. Here Paul's saying, the Jewish people, they have a lot of zeal, but they've missed the mark. They missed it. And Paul says, oh, well, how have they missed it? He says, they had all of the head knowledge. They had all the knowledge. They would study the Torah, that's the Old Testament. They would study it for hours and hours a day. They had the Old Testament in their hands. They also were a great family origin. They could trace their origin back to Abraham. I mean, they had the best effort. They had the best works. They could do everything. They looked really good on paper. And Paul says they missed it. All of that, they missed it. Because what Paul is going to say, and he's going to use this word repeated, I believe it's 13 times in this text, faith. They missed the element of faith. So close, yet missed it. I mean, some of us can be in this room here today, and we can be so close to the Christian faith, yet miss it. Some of us can grow up in Sunday school and get the Sunday school pins, or maybe we go to Awana and we have all of the awards from Awana, and we did all the things we had to do and should have done, and we were in small group, and we came and worshiped on Sunday mornings. We did all the stuff. But we never actually put our faith in Jesus. We did a lot of things for Jesus, but we didn't do the one thing he wants, which is put faith in Jesus. So what Paul's trying to say is, you got to understand the gospel first. It's not about what you do, D-O. It's about what has been done, D-O-N-E. It's about what Christ has done, and you, by faith, believe in his righteousness that's applied to you. What he's saying in verse 4 is they tried to earn their own righteousness. They tried to do all the stuff. And believe me, I'm for all the things I just mentioned. I'm for Awana. My kids are in it. I'm for church. I'm for small groups. But people believe that that's the pathway of earning righteousness to God. They miss it. They can have all the zeal in the world, and they can miss it if they do not have faith in Jesus, who accomplished all of that for them, and it's applied to them. So Paul is adamant to understand the gospel. Your people you love, this is a predominantly Catholic area. And I love Catholics. We hang out, we chill. When we go through Growth Track together, usually we have multiple people who are coming out of mainline religions like Catholic or Lutheran. And what often happens is they felt stuck in that their works were in a way saving them. It was pushed upon them. And what we teach here is it's by faith. We don't do those works to earn faith. We have faith, and out of that faith we obey God. And see, there's two approaches to God. It's righteousness you earn, and it doesn't get you anywhere, or righteousness that's been given to you, what Martin Luther called alien righteousness or gift righteousness. I mean, it's outside of you that's been granted to you. And so what some of your family and friends that maybe live in Chicagoland believe in is a religion. And they think this. They think, I obey, and therefore I'm accepted. What the gospel says is, I'm accepted by faith, therefore I obey. Did you see the difference? It's super important. Religion says, man, I've got to obey. I've got to earn this righteousness. This was his Jewish brothers and sisters that he's so upset that they don't believe. They're trying to obey and therefore find acceptance with God. And Paul's saying that's not the gospel. The gospel is I'm accepted by faith and therefore now I believe. Now I obey. I'm accepted and therefore now I obey. C.S. Lewis says it this way. What separates Christianity from every other religion is grace. We obey in gratitude and love for God who saved us, not in order to gain his favor. See, the Jewish people were trying to gain God's favor, trying to do all the stuff. And all this stuff is good. It's just not saving. It's not going to save them. And so he goes on to roll this out in verse 5 through 8. For Moses writes about the righteousness that is based on the law, that the person who does the commandments shall live by them. But the righteousness based on faith says, do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven, that is to bring Christ down, verse 7, or who will descend into the abyss, That is to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of faith that we proclaim. Okay, what does that mean? All right. In other words, Paul is saying your righteousness is not a quest. It's not a quest where I've got to reach some zeal up to heaven where Christ is, or I've got to somehow conjure some willpower to obey in the depths of who I am. It's not a quest. It's a righteousness that's granted to me by faith. What Paul is saying is the people are trying to do the very thing that Jesus did. Jesus came from heaven to earth. He went into the abyss. He went into the grave on Silent Saturday during his death, and then he raised again out of the tomb on Easter, which we're going to celebrate soon. It's like Jesus did all that. Don't try to do it again. He did it for you. Believe that. Have faith in that. And then out of that, you do obey him. Out of that, you serve him. Out of that, you go to small group. Out of that, you go to one. Out of that, you walk with him. And so the Apostle Paul, he uses this kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's a play on words. But the word is near you in your mouth and in your heart. Meaning, he's like, you're trying to search for it out there. It's actually closer than you even realize. It starts with your mouth and your heart. He explains this in verses 9 and 10. He says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. That's it. It's not do all this righteous works to get saved. It says confess and believe. Confess is simply agreeing with God about your current state, that you're messed up, that you're a sinner. You don't have it all together. You've got more broken pieces than you have pieces put together. And you come to him and you confess, say, God, I can't do this. I'm fully surrendering my life to you. I confess you. And then believe that God raised him from the dead. They say, you will be what? Saved. You'll be saved. Believe the gospel. It's almost like, wait, is it that easy? Yes. Yes, it is. It's closer as your heart and your mouth. It's that easy. It's that close to you. It's just simple confession and belief that Jesus is Lord, that he came for you, that your faith is in him. Confess and believe. I love this text. This is the text. If you're like, okay, my neighbor, my family member, they're close to salvation. I don't know, I feel like they're right on the line. Where do I take them? You take them to this verse right here. I've taken so many people to this verse right here. One guy, his name was Ryan. He was in my office, and he had tons of questions. Like he grew up Catholic, and he's like, so what about this works and righteousness, and what about faith, and how does that work, and all this stuff. And I said, let's just read Romans 10, 9, and 10. Let's just say what it says. It says, confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord. Lord means master. You want to serve him. You're laying down your life for his. And believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. You will be saved. Boom. That's it. Do you want to pray right now? And he says, yeah, is it that easy? I said, yes. Pray. And it's not something magical about the prayer. It's truly belief in your heart. And then later on, he gets baptized and we celebrate, and his life is transformed and new again. Paul goes on to say, what does this believe in the gospel look like? It says, verse 10, for with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one is confesses and is saved. Meaning it's not the baptism, your church attendance, your tithe, your best heart effort. It is by your heart you believe and you are justified. You confess and you are saved. And then he goes on to say, verse 11, for everyone who believes in him will not be put to shame, meaning you won't be disappointed. If you take this step, if you say yes to Jesus, you won't be disappointed. And not only that this is a massive call. If last week was God's choosing, which is accurate and what the Bible teaches, then we get to God saying, the doors are open, everyone's invited to the party. And he says, there's no distinction between Jew and Greek. Verse 12, for the same Lord is Lord of all, bestowing his riches on all who call on him. Verse 13, for everyone, can you read that word with me? Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be what? Saved. The gospel opens up for everyone. There's no distinction. It doesn't matter your background, your ethnicity. It doesn't matter where you work, where you were born, your family of origin. None of it matters. The doors are open for anyone, and if they confess and believe, they will be saved. It's not try hard, do hard, work towards it. It's belief by faith in Jesus. And so Paul, he says, what is the process for me sharing the faith? It's understand the gospel. It's not about a righteousness I earn. It's a righteousness given to me. I believe, I confess with my mouth and believe in my heart that God raised him from the dead. I will be saved. And he says, okay, now you understand all that. Now go share this message. This next section is the Apostle Paul is in the locker room right before the big game, and he's getting the team amped up. All right? So it's his job right now, the text we're about ready to read, to amp you up. You should leave out of here excited about your new marching orders as a Christian. Here he is. This is what he says. Verse 14. Here it is. How will they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. But they have not obeyed the gospel. For Isaiah said, Lord, who has believed what he has heard from us? Verse 17, here it is. So faith comes from hearing, and hearing the word of Christ. Paul's in the locker room, and he's saying, go and tell so that they can hear and believe. You are a sent people group. If you have Jesus in your heart, you are sent. So go and tell so that they can hear and believe. I wonder if you could help me today and repeat it with me. It's go and tell so they can hear and believe. Some of you with me, the rest of the room isn't. I wonder if you could help me today in understanding the call that Paul puts on your life is this. Go and tell so that you'd hear and believe. That's the call. You've got to get out there and share your faith. You have this thing inside of you. You've got to get out there. I love Jesus. He has these stories. They're called parables. And these parable he tells of a master with his servants. And he's about ready to leave on a journey. And he calls 3 of his servants together. And he says, I'm going to give you some talents, which is some money. And he says, I'm going to choose based off of your ability. And to the one, he gives 5 talents. To the second one, he gives 2. And the last guy, he gives 1 talent to. And what we understand this parable to mean is, what Jesus is saying is, these people, the illustration of the talents is entrusted with the message of the gospel. And so the gentleman leaves. The guy with 5 goes and invests, and he doubles. He gets 10 talents. The guy with 2, he also doubles, and he gets 4. The guy with 1 talent gets scared. He goes in his backyard, he digs a hole, and he buries the 1 talent. The master comes back, and he lines up his servants. And he says, what have you done with what I've been given you? How have you used the property that I entrusted into your care? The guy with 5 comes up. He says, I made 10. The master says, Enter into the joy of your master. Well done, thy good and faithful servant. The guy with 2 shows the 4 talents. And the master again says, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your master. And the guy with 1 who buried his talent, which is like burying the gospel. He says, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, and so I buried it. And the master is not happy. He said, if you knew me to be a hard man, you should have put it into the bank and at least would collect interest. But no, you squandered it. You didn't do the thing I called you to do that I entrusted you with. So he says this, he says, get away from me, you wicked and slothful servant. Ouch. That's harsh. See, Jesus has given you something. He's entrusted you with the message of the gospel. You can't go and bury it. You can't put it under a lampstand. You can't hide it. You got to get it out there. So that the God can say, hey, well done. Well done. You shared the hope that you have. The hope of eternal life. I'm here with you, and you're like, man, it's hard to share the gospel. I feel like people will reject me. I'll be criticized. I get all that. I wonder if these 3 things can help you as it's helped me in my journey of sharing the gospel. The first is this. I want to help you today, and so I would say first is to be for people. Like in a America where people are against us because we're Christians, they've got to see how much you care for them. And I don't know who said this, but care for them before they know how much you care. Like they want to know that you care so much for them, that you go out of your way to be for them. And once they know this person is for me, they're going to start listening to you. You're going to have an opportunity to share the gospel. I love Dennis Parrish. Last night, he was awarded by the city of Carroll Stream because of all of his work this last year by hosting events with partnership with Gospelife in the community. And he got the Citizens' Choice Award last night in front of the entire council of Carroll Stream. So proud of him because what was read over him was all of it was Gospelife is for Carroll Stream. That's what the lady said. Like, they're for us. We're for them. And it gives us an opportunity to share the gospel with them. Second thing I would say is share your pain. Yeah, your pain. You got pain? I got pain. You know, vulnerability produces more vulnerability. Don't hold on to your pain. Use it as an opportunity to share the gospel. Just the gym this last week, talking about my wife and I's struggle of having more kids and the fertility treatments and it not happening and all that. And it actually opened up an opportunity to share how Jesus has helped us walk through that difficulty. And this lady at the gym shared her story. And I was able to go to a level of depth because I was sharing my pain. You have pain. Would you use that pain? Maybe it's failure to connect with someone, because guess what? We all have pain and we all have failure. And connect with them on a deep level to then point them to Jesus. And the last is this. All you have is all you need. All you have is all you need. The moment you think you don't have all you need is the moment you talk yourself out of the moment to share the gospel. You know that? I didn't go to seminary. I'm not a pastor. I don't have all the articulation of all this stuff. No. You have all you need to do this. God has placed you at a post right where you are, in your neighborhood, on your street, where you work, live, and play. All of that is meant for you to establish your testimony to be able to share with other people. Like, your testimony is huge. It's so powerful. No one can argue your testimony. They can argue parts about the Bible and Calvinism and Arminianism like we do, but they can't argue your testimony. All you have is all you need to go and share the hope you have that the gospel has rewritten your story in God's plan. Do you see that, child of God? I hope you do. It was 2 weeks ago where I was on my driveway and my neighbor came across the street. And he started talking. And as he was talking, we were talking, I wasn't really paying attention. Do you have those conversations? I was thinking about I had to write a paper for class. I need to get on this phone call that I've been waiting all day to have, and I need to still have it, and the kids need to be fed. Like, that's what's going through my head. And my neighbor, who doesn't know Jesus, says, what are you doing at your church for Easter? I was like, oh, Lord. Like, I wasn't zoned in on my neighbor, telling about Jesus. I was thinking about all the things I had to do. And it was that moment of conviction of like, all that stuff doesn't matter right now. I need to tell him about, we're having an Easter. We're going to talk about Jesus. We're going to celebrate his resurrection. And we started talking about how his wife is Buddhist and how he's trying to figure out this whole faith thing, and he wants his kids to decide. And then he, at the end of the conversation, committed to come to Easter services, and like all that stuff began to happen. And the Lord, like, man, Austin, what are you doing? Your neighbor's right there in front of you, and you almost missed it, and he had to initiate the conversation. So I'm not up here saying I'm great at it. Actually, the Lord just called me out on it. But I wonder if there wouldn't be a revival that starts here inside of Gospelife. I did the numbers that there are 1 million people in DuPage County. There's 1 million people that are in our community. And I ran some more numbers, and I found that in our directorate, Gospelife, there are over 1,000 people in our system, meaning that call or participate here at Gospelife. I wonder if a revival wouldn't start with us, where we share the gospel and 1% of DuPage County comes to know Jesus. That's 10,000 people. That would mean, church, that over the next year, over 2024, if each of us were to reach out to 10 people, we would reach the 10,000 number. That people in our community, we'd reach 1%. I wonder if we would not be so bold as to believe that all we have is all we need to share the message of hope found in the gospel. And that the truth would come where everyone who believes upon the name of Jesus will be saved. And we would see a great, massive brush fire in DuPage County of God doing a marvelous, marvelous work in our community. Would you be a part of that? I wonder if you would step out in faith today. If you would say, I understand the gospel, I believe the gospel, now it's my job to share the gospel. I'm not going to plant it in the ground. I'm going to invest it in the lives of people. I'm going to share my story because my testimony really does have weight. See, my testimony is that he's brought us from death to life. Grace has rewrote my story. I can now testify. I can tell DuPage County of what God has done in my life. See, Jesus Christ the righteous, he's justified me. He can do that for others. I'm going to use my testimony to share the hope. See, what we're calling Gospelife to is to be door holders for more people to be ushered into the kingdom of God. I wonder if we can't be part of stealing people out of hell and into heaven, that God in his mercy can deliver people from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. And it's going to be about you and I sharing the hope that's found in Jesus Christ. Would you stand with me? Would you stand with me and sing this song, My Testimony, as we begin to believe for revival in DuPage County?